Can a Garmin watch convert a lifetime Apple user? Let's find out. Hey guys, Louis here from Smart Home Sounds, and if you're a regular viewer of the channel, then you'll know that I'm about as invested in the Apple ecosystem as someone could possibly be, with my iPhone, my AirPods, my MacBook, my iPad, and of course, the Apple Watch Ultra. But I'd say that I'm the least brand loyal when it comes to wearable tech, and the Whoop is actually much more of a constant on my wrist. Plus, I've got a half marathon coming up and a pretty challenging 16-week training program on the horizon, which has led me to do some research on whether my Ultra is going to cut it or whether I should be looking elsewhere. So I'm going to give myself 3 days to put it to the test to see if I should make the swap. I recently tried something similar with a Nothing Phone 2A, which you guys seem to enjoy, so hopefully you'll enjoy this one too. But as always, let me know down in the comments below if there's something else that you'd like me to try. So we've just got this unboxed, and I went for the 47mm size in the slate grey and black colourway, which came in at £639, but it's also available in a 42mm and 51mm version too. On first impressions, it's a very different look and feel from the Apple Watch, going for the much more rugged but still watch feel. It's made from fibre reinforced polymer and steel, and it feels very durable. Now, it has been tested to US military standards for thermal shock and water resistance, so you'd like to think it would be. And as far as the touchscreen watch face itself is concerned, this is a 1.3-inch solar charged display. So far so good, but to be honest with you guys, I do think that the Garmin watch faces are pretty bland and uninspiring in comparison to the Ultra, but it's really what's underneath and inside this watch that helps to justify its price tag. Now, I could sit here and list off every single piece of spec, but I would genuinely be sat here until next week. So if you want to see the very extensive feature list, then I'll leave a link below. But instead, I'm going to cover the key need-to-know details. So let's start where every Garmin user I have ever met starts when discussing smartwatches, and that is, of course, battery life. Now, according to Garmin, this watch can last up to 22 days in smartwatch mode with solar charging, which is pretty impressive. Now, obviously, this is all subject to just how much you're using the watch and what you're using it for, but put it this way, it lasts for weeks longer than the Ultra, that's for sure. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more serious. So we've got a wealth of performance features, activity features, navigational features, health features, and more smartwatch focus features that we'll be touching on throughout the video. Okay, so I think that just about covers all of the key need to know. So I'll check back in with you guys in a couple of hours time once I've had a chance to get this set up and working. Okay, so this is what I've learned so far. Now, first of all, as expected, you will need to download the Garmin Connect app to get this watch up and running. And this is essentially where you can view all of your metrics for the day, including steps, calories, heart rate, and so on. Now, also in here, you can take on different challenges. You can view your workouts, your calendar, and you've also got your newsfeed and so much more. Now, I've only had this watch on for a few hours and I'm already lost in the data. Now, I've been trying to personalize the watch a little bit more and worked out that I have more customization within the Garmin IQ app, which has watch faces, music streaming platforms, and things like that on there. Now, it's not as customizable as the Ultra and the faces don't quite feel as fresh either, but I found one that I'm happy with. Right then guys, home time. Now the Garmin is actually saying that it's got 13 days worth of battery life left, which I am very, very interested to test out and see how well that holds up over the next couple of days. Morning guys, how are we all? As you can see, the sun is shining behind me. So we're gonna head out on a 10K run before taking both of these watches down to the beach, and we'll get the paddleboard out as well. Now, I did sleep with both of these watches on last night as well, and truth be told, both of them are pretty uncomfortable. Well, they are for me anyway, and they are quite big on my wrist, and when you start to get a little bit warm and sweat, you definitely notice that you're wearing them, so they're nowhere near as comfortable as my Whoop band. But I did track my sleep last night on both watches, and I'm going to track my sleep again tonight. And then on day 3, we'll compare the metrics and see how accurate they both are. So I wanted to go for a nice 10K run to be able to properly compare the workout metrics from both watches. Oh, and something I found out only a few minutes ago, I can actually connect my AirPods to the Garmin, which is quite cool. So I've got my Spotify playlist downloaded to the watch itself. Okay, there it is then, 10K done. Now the sound effects and haptic feedback on the Garmin is nice, just like the call outs from the Ultra. And although I found it a little clunkier to navigate for daily usage, I think that the Garmin is actually better for working out with. It's not too heavy and the strap isn't uncomfortable or irritable when you start to sweat. The Garmin watch face was a little bit easier to see in comparison to the Ultra. I think I might actually prefer having the physical buttons to navigate the watch on the Garmin whilst working out rather than the touchscreen interface on the Ultra. I also like that the Garmin will update the battery life expectancy when you switch it into workout mode, so you have a realistic prediction of how long it'll last when you're using it more. The Ultra just gives you a battery percentage, which of course decreases quicker when working out, so I feel like I have more security with the Garmin. Now, whilst we're on the subject of working out, I figured why not head back into the studio and take a quick look at the breakdowns of that first 10K run. Now, even though I do a lot of running and training, I also sit at my desk to edit these videos, and that's a lot of hours sat down, as my Apple Watch does like to remind me now and again. So I want to give Flexispot a shout out for sending me a new standing desk, which can help in lots of ways, but especially for back pain, helps with posture, better circulation, and I've even seen some people saying it makes them more productive. So I'll be very interested to see if that's true. Long-time viewers of this channel will know that we've been fans of Flexispot since we got our hands on a standing desk for our office a few years ago, and because we love it so much, we wanted another one for our studio. Now this is the E7 Plus standing desk, which is height adjustable to give me the flexibility to sit down or stand up throughout the day, and it's controlled with this keypad here. I've then opted for this bamboo desktop, which works really well in our space, and as you can see, it's quite big. It's 78 inches by 30 inches, I think, which is perfect for my monitor, laptop stand and everything else. Now, I'm also not worried about load on this, as it can take up to 440 pounds. So that's how I'm trying to stay more active, but let's get back to how I'm getting on with the Garmin. So firstly, I actually got different distances from both watches. So 10.04 kilometers on the Ultra and 9.93 kilometers on the Garmin. Now, without actually measuring the distance myself, I can't be too sure as to which one is more accurate, but I have done a little bit of research online, and it does seem that a lot of different users are getting different experiences. Now, a lot of the other stats are very similar, including calories, my average cadence, average kilometer split pace, but there are a couple that differ too. Now, for example, my heart rate is very different. So the Garmin measured 123 beats per minute, whereas the Ultra measured 150 beats per minute. Now, I know how I felt on that run, and I did feel like I was pushing myself a little bit. So I'm kind of leaning more towards believing the Ultra on that one. But I think for those of you guys out there who do a lot of heart rate training or like zone training, then I would definitely dive into this a little bit deeper and do some more research. Now, I mentioned at the start that there were some additional stats on the Garmin that I was looking forward to seeing, and at this point, it is worth noting that you can get third-party apps with the Apple Watch to replicate a lot of what you can get with the Garmin, but it's not all built in and as easy to access as it is with the Fenix. So as soon as I finish working out, I get post-workout feedback, such as time spent in aerobic and anaerobic zones, training load and recovery times, and I do think that these would be really useful, especially when training for an event like a half marathon. In the morning, it also gives you a training readiness score, which I currently get from my Whoop, which essentially lets me know if I can push myself more that day or if I need to prioritize my rest. Now, I think that the key thing with the data from this watch is that it can then be used with Garmin Coach to inform the daily training recommendations and any adaptive training plans. Now, it's very similar to what you get with the Nike training app or the Runner app, for example, but again, it's all hosted within one app and you don't have any potential extra costs. Now, one thing I think the Ultra definitely has over the Garmin are those exercise rings, and that's something that I personally really like. It's almost got like an addictive quality to it. You can see those rings constantly throughout the day, and it almost makes you want to exercise more to make sure you close them. Now, the Garmin does, of course, give you all of that information just in a different way, and it doesn't quite feel as polished, so it just doesn't have the same effect. Oh, and one other thing I've not yet mentioned is the maps on the Garmin. So you can create routes on the watch, have turn-by-turn guidance, and scroll offline maps. And my personal favorite, it can give you a heads up on how much elevation is ahead. Now, of course, you can do all of that on the Apple Watch, but it is a little bit more fiddly, jumping between apps, especially when running. But having said that, I do personally prefer the look of the maps in Apple, and I do think you get a little bit more of a detailed view. Is there anywhere better than being by the sea? I don't think so. Now, obviously, both of these models are completely waterproof and can withstand pressure of up to 100 meters deep, so a little dip in the sea won't do them any harm at all. And unlike some smartwatches, both the Garmin and the Ultra offer plenty of activities, which is pretty cool. So after walking around for a couple of hours or so, I've started to notice that the Garmin doesn't really offer too much in terms of smartwatch functionality. Now you can of course set up Garmin Pay, receive emails, texts and alerts, but you can't reply or answer calls, which is a shame. And yes, I know this is a contentious subject for some, but I am one of those people who will take a call on the watch if need be. But anyway, the Garmin does seem quite lackluster in this department. A few hours ago when I'm out in the sea, it's the perfect device to have with you. But when I'm just walking around town, grabbing a coffee, doing some emails and just going about my daily life, it doesn't really offer me anything. Now, we all know that the Apple Watch Ultra is capable of doing what, 75–80% of what your iPhone is capable of doing, rather it's just on your wrist. And the more I'm using the Garmin, the more I'm starting to understand its strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so it's the final day with the Fenix today and it's time to see how they stack up for sleep. Now in terms of stats, the sleep time is actually pretty close. So we had 5 hours 39 minutes on the Ultra and 5 hours 50 on the Fenix. And yes, I am aware I do need to get some more sleep. Both then give a fairly detailed sleep performance breakdown, which did differ in how much deep sleep both watches think I got, but I do like that the Garmin then translates all of this data into a score out of 100. Now I'd also say that Apple tend to offer more of a range of figures, whereas the Garmin gives more specifics. And yes, there are more stats available with the Garmin, but I think that Apple offers most of the stats that people would want to know. But realistically, as a Whoop user, neither really compare to that for me. Now I did refer to the battery life of these watches on day one, and I've got to be completely honest with you guys, the Garmin has definitely surprised me. Now, I've not actually charged it at all during my testing, and I started with 13 days worth of charge right out of the box, and it still says now that I've got 7 days remaining, and if I flick it into workout mode real quick, it's saying that I've got 23 hours worth of usage left, and that's with GPS on as well. Now, the Ultra on the other hand, well, I've had to charge that every night. So there we have it guys, those 72 hours have absolutely flown by, and what are my final thoughts then? Well, I do agree with what a lot of people seem to think online, that the Garmin Fenix 7 Pro is everything that Apple market the Ultra to be. From extreme sports to high endurance to super challenging conditions, it's been designed for professional athletes and explorers. And while technically the Ultra can cope with all of that, the battery is one major flaw. As someone who is not a professional athlete, and let's face it, very deep within the Apple ecosystem, where do I stand? There's no denying that for me, the Ultra fits better into my day-to-day life, whether I'm in the office, whether I'm out and about, or doing a workout, and it's more than adequate for that lifestyle. Now, personally, I prefer the look and the feel of the Ultra too, and as something that sits on your wrist, that's pretty important. But the Garmin has got some great pros, and as someone who is now taking running far more seriously, I can see the real benefits to all of that data and the way that it's shared with me. Now, I also can't deny that if I was to ever run a full marathon, I would definitely not be trusting the Apple Watch Ultra's battery life. In a dream world, I'd probably have both. Ultra for daily use, Garmin for my running and training. As someone who could be termed an Apple fanboy, I definitely think that the Garmin gives them a run for their money, and there are 3 main reasons to buy the Garmin over the Ultra. So number 1, you like the more rugged look and feel, the physical buttons and things like that. Number 2, you take training much more seriously than basic fitness. Maybe you're pushing for PBs, you're running ultras, or you're plotting out routes. And 3, you're a nerd for data. In all seriousness, this is heaven for anyone who loves stats. But it's time to hear your guys' thoughts. So make sure you get in the comments and let me know, and also leave any other recommendations for what I should test next. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.